right, welcome everybody back to another episode of the Big Doug and Carmi Show. You one-stop shop for all things Commanders. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure that you subscribe to the channel, hit that notification button so that you never miss an episode. Like today's episode with Tashan Reed, one of the newer members of the Washington Post. Tashan, how are you?
Pretty good, man. Just got back from practice not too long ago. Getting ready for had my first home game last week. Had my first road trip this week, heading up to Atlanta tomorrow. So I think been a fun ride already, but excited to get into it.
We will get into it. Your first time on the show. We like to get to meet folk a little bit. You came here from the Raiders, Missouri. Did you graduate from Missouri? Did I see that?
Yes, sir. Got my degree up there on the wall. I'm moving into my new spot, so it's boxes everywhere and stuff. But that was one of the first things I put up. But yeah, I'm from St. Louis originally, born and raised, and grew up there, and then went to Mizzou, and that's when I got into journalism.
Is it Missouri, or as my granny used to say, Missouri?
It depends on which part you're from. From St. Louis, it's Missouri. You get out to where I went to school in Columbia, it becomes Missouri all of a sudden. So yeah, it's a little bit more country out there.
Um, Big change from the Raiders to the Commanders, I guess. Two teams not really going in the same direction. What has been the biggest difference you've seen since you've been in Washington?
I think in a lot of ways, there's been some similarities in terms of the structure of the franchise. Just because, and it's not surprising because there's some connecting threads there. Like obviously with the Raiders hiring Pete Carroll this year, Dan Quinn came from the Pete Carroll tree and was with them during their heyday in Seattle, and that, and Dan Quinn is his own man, but that informed a lot of how he goes about building his program in terms of really putting a lot of effort towards instilling the culture and working on those interpersonal relationships. And then even on the front office side, Raiders GM John Spytek and Commanders GM Adams Peters actually worked together with the Broncos for a minute back during the Peyton Manning era, and the successful years they had under John Elway and that run. So they're different guys, of course, but they kind of run the ship in similar ways. There's a lot of overlap there. But like you said, I think the big difference is the state of the roster. The Raiders roster, they're basically where the Commanders were the year before last, kind of starting from the ground up, don't really have that many pieces. But the Commanders are really sort of the vision of what they're trying to get to, with the Raiders. And so it's kind of interesting how that's just flipped, even though Pete Carroll's the mentor, he's kind of trying to follow what his mentee is doing. But I think with the Commanders is, obviously they set the bar high last year. You have obviously an incredible young quarterback in Jaden Daniels, and some other pieces around him. I think that run last year caught pretty much even like the most diehard Commanders fan, that probably caught him by surprise, making that run to the NFC Championship game. And it's a hell of a start, but, you kind of set the bar high. And so it's like anything beneath that is a disappointment now moving forward. And so that adds to the challenge of, not to say that they want to push to make that Super Bowl run anyway. But now if you don't, it kind of adds on that pressure. And so it's been an interesting start to the year. 2-1. It whooped the Raiders last week, even without Daniels out there. So that showed the gap between those two teams. But moving forward, I think as these injuries keep piling up, it kind of raises some question of, can this team really push to meet that same bar that they hit last year?
Well, you brought it up. You're out in Ashburn today. They went through the injuries. I said as early as Wednesday, I really just didn't think there was any chance they were going to roll Jaden Daniels out there unless he literally was 100% and no brace on, which is what happened. Terry McLaurin a no-go. The interesting, curious case of Terry McLaurin and what the injury is. I think of the group, maybe John Bates is one of the bigger losses that they've had here. And, of course, Noah Brown, God bless him, he's great in the room and he's different than what we had, but he hasn't played many games since he's been here in Washington. Tell us about the injuries and what you think they kind of look like going forward.
Yeah, I think, while they all are significant injuries, I think they're more short-term and not a lot of long-term concern there. Even with Terry McLaurin, I know people got a little scared. Anytime you see a guy getting additional opinions, you're like, all right, is this something super serious? But at least from what we know, it's not expected to require surgery, and it isn't something that's going to, knock him out for the season or anything crazy like that. And so it's more of a short-term problem, but nonetheless, it's something they have to navigate. It's kind of worked out for them a little bit that it's come at a softer part of the schedule. Like obviously last week they were still able to blow out the Raiders. Going against the Falcons team this week, they just got 30-0 smoked by the Carolina Panthers, who I don't think any of us really think the Panthers are a great team. So if you get beat like that by the Panthers, you're probably not either. So these are two winnable games, even without Daniels being out there. And so like you mentioned, if there is any concern about his status of not being 100% or worrying, can he move the same or is he more susceptible to hits now? It's just not really worth it, especially if there's a good chance that you can go out and beat the team anyway, which I do think is the case going against the Falcons this week. And so among the other ones, McLaurin is the one that definitely jumps out the most, given the nature of it, and him getting second opinions and things of that nature. But it's at this point, it's more so about volume because you have your start quarterback, your starting receiver, lost Eckler for the year, Wise for the year. It feels like the entire secondary is banged up right now. Will Harris going on IR earlier this week, with a broken leg. We'll see if he's able to get back, toward the end of the year. But next man up is like the cliche, but you got to have some men to be the next man up, right? I mean, it's getting kind of like this is one of the older rosters in the league, and I don't think they, while they were really good last year, I wouldn't say they were known for their depth. They're still waiting on some of those young guys to come along, and so it's going to be a pretty telling. I mean, especially at receiver this week with McLaurin and Brown out. Looking at guys like McCaffrey and Lane, like, are those guys ready? And they kind of need to be given where they are right now, and so. While you never want your starters to be out, I do think it will be nice for them to be able to get more of a look at some of these young guys and get a better idea of who they are.
And Tashan, that was my follow-up, right? So obviously Jaden Daniels was announced he's not going to play this week. Were you surprised by that? Like, I feel like announcing it on Friday does kind of put a viewpoint out there. Like, hey, potentially there could have been some gamesmanship, but wait till a game time decision on Sunday. Were you surprised that Jaden Daniels is not going to play this week? Did you see him moving during practice? And I guess in regard to that, like, could they have potentially waited for a game decision for that? Or does it? I guess my bigger question is there? Go ahead. Sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
I was going to say, like, I mean, that's kind of how they handled it last week. It didn't surprise me that they just went ahead and announced it on Friday. I think for one, since he wasn't out there today, people kind of, even if you don't announce it, like, we kind of know what it is. You know what I mean? So I don't know how much of an advantage you really gain by holding off until Sunday. But I think with him, because he was limited came back last Friday, and then Wednesday and Thursday he was limited. And, while he was out there, had his helmet on and all that, like, he was in sweats. You could see, like, he didn't have on pads on his legs like the other quarterbacks. You can see he wasn't quite moving exactly like Jaden Daniels usually moves. And so it's clear he's not 100%. He's not like, he's practicing, so it's not that bad, but he's not quite himself yet. And that seems like the bar that they want to see him reach and be able to get to being a full practice participant before just throwing him back out there. Because, I mean, it's just, as this franchise knows, going back to Robert Griffin III, like, it can go bad really quickly and never be the same. And so, especially if it's not that serious and all you got to wait is a couple of weeks, like, it's just really not worth it. Like, they have to think with the long-term vision in mind when you have a young quarterback like that.
I've been asking this all week, Tashan, and I'm curious your thoughts. Usually there is some sort of advantage one way or the other when you go to the backup quarterback, just because, say, the defensive coordinator might have to re-game plan. I think of RG3, as you point out, and then going to Kirk Cousins. Like, that's two different game plans. For the offensive coordinator, Cliff Kingsbury, it's basically the same program, right? Like, they don't have to do much to go from Jaden to Marcus Mariota. On the same spectrum, I think it's the same way for the defensive coordinator right now. He doesn't have to worry necessarily about a different game plan. Obviously, Jaden presents some different things, some more difficult concepts to cover. But I'm curious, like, who is it the better advantage from this, the offensive coordinator or the defensive coordinator?
I would say the offensive coordinator with Cliff, just because, and I think that's part of the reason why you go get that specific type of quarterback in Marcus Mariota. Like, he's older, he's not as fast and athletic as Jaden Daniels, but he can do a lot of things in the quarterback run game that Jaden Daniels does. And so, that's why you go get that type of backup quarterback instead of go getting, a traditional drop back, pocket passer that can't do all the other things that Daniels does. And so, I mean, you saw against the Raiders, like, it was really a run first approach. I mean, anytime you run for over 200 yards, that's clearly the case. But you saw, Mariota on those zone reads and design quarterback runs, the scrambles, and so I think for Cliff, even though he's not as good as Daniels and he can't do some of the things that he can do, it allows you to basically have the same offense, which, Daniels isn't the only one that's out. There are some other pieces there like McLaurin and others who aren't in the mix anymore. And, like, you can run the same plays, but the guys aren't as good. It might not work. Right. So I think, given where their losses are, is going to have to be another run first approach is what I would expect in this one. Try to basically beat them how you beat the Raiders. because they did have some big pass plays toward the back half of that game once it kind of gotten out of hand, like the long McLaurin catch where he got hurt, or McCaffrey's long catch. But I feel like the lead was really established on the ground in that game, and I think that sort of has to be the same model in this one, just because it's hard to expect the pass game to be really anywhere close to what it was with Daniels and McLaurin both being out.
I've been getting
And that's what I was
dragged
going to
on.
ask.
I've been getting dragged on X all week for this, but one of the things I think that Jaden Daniels can watch this film and study, and we talk about areas he can get better. You can tell that Mariota's been in that read option since Oregon. He just feels more comfortable. Like, I think people assume that Jaden's a great read option quarterback because he runs the ball, but there's a science to that give and hold by reading the end. And I mean, Mariota's just been doing it for a long time. He felt more comfortable doing it this last week than I think Jaden does. And while people tend to not agree with me on social media, I really do think that that's where a place where he can sit and watch and say, okay, I can hold that ball out just a little bit longer, make it different. And I think that was a big key to some of that run game last week.
Yeah, I think the thing with Jaden, like, even if he's wrong, like, he's so talented that he can still make himself right. If he makes the wrong read on one of those types of plays. And for Mariota being older and having some of the injuries that he's had, like, he can't really do that anymore. Like, when he was at Oregon, sure, but just over the course of being more experienced, you would expect him to be better in that area. And I think that's something like Daniels that could help take his running ability to the next level, because there's one downside, and that was even the case at LSU, is like he takes some hits that he probably doesn't have to, right? And
It does.
I think that's something that he has to learn to get out of, and that comes with experience. I think a lot of quarterbacks who use their legs in that way, like, you have to see them kind of change. Like, you can look at Josh Allen, you can look at Lamar Jackson, Marcus Mariota, being one, he had all those injuries in his career for a reason, right? So, you end up learning it the hard way more times than not. And so, Jaden, even though his injury isn't super serious, missing a couple weeks, kind of, learning from that and being able to sit back and see which ways he might be able to, lessen the impact. Even if he doesn't rush for as many yards, you would rather him take less hits. Because this is about the long-term view. As much as they're trying to win right now and go for the Super Bowl run right now, like, you want Jaden to be there for 15 years, not 8, And so in order to make that happen, he's going to have to, get a little bit better at protecting his body.
All right, yeah, going along with that, so losing Jay Daniels is obviously a great offensive weapon. Washington's also losing their top 2 wide receivers. Terry McLaurin's going to be out. Noah Brown is going to be out. The Atlanta Falcons have a pretty good secondary as well. Xavier Watts, Billy Bowman, Jesse Bates are pretty solid. Who do you think Washington needs to step up this week in replace of these position players that are gone? And what have you seen with Bill? Is he potentially going to play this week, in your opinion?
So they caught a little bit of a break with Terrell being ruled out, top cornerback. I think it was a hamstring injury on the Falcons. So, that kind of levels the playing field a little bit with McLaurin being out. I would say they still do have a quality secondary. I agree with you, but I think it's going to be a Debo game. Like, that's kind of what you would expect there. And I think he's been pretty solid this season. Last week, it was more about his kick return ability than as a receiver. It was a little bit quiet, but I think he's kind of got to be your number one option on offense at this point from the passing perspective. And I think, McCaffrey, he had that long touchdown last week, but we hadn't really seen much of him since they drafted him in the 3rd round last year. And that's it's not the highest pick ever, but it's one where you kind of expect a guy to start to come along at some point. And while he's been like Debo, he's been pretty good on kick returns. You want to see him doing more on offense consistently, play in and play out. And so I think the spotlight's really on him. You could throw Jalen Lane in there, but I think, him being a rookie and you kind of expect him to kind of have a little bit more, bumps in the road. McCaffrey, you kind of want to start seeing it, right? So I think that's the player I really spotlight in that receiver room, as looking for him to pop a little bit more. Debo's proven himself. He's going to be the number one option. We know what to expect out of Debo, but I think McCaffrey's going to be the one you're looking to see a little bit more than you've seen in the past.
With Debo, and I think about this after that huge run, I mean, the team is so good at special teams, and they get a lot of hidden yardage out of the special teams game. And I understand with the new kickoff rules, like, there are yards to be had, and Debo is a guy that can get them. My only question is, and I don't know if anybody's asked Dan Quinn about this, but, like, you couldn't use him in almost the whole first series after he had that big run. Like, while you need him, while it's nice to have him in that, also, like, how many snaps does he lose because he had a big run and now he's winded? I'm curious how they kind of like sort that.
I mean, I think it was Nikki asked him at the end of the presser today if Debo would still have his same role on special teams, and he said yeah. So I don't think it doesn't seem like they really plan on changing it. Because I mean, I wrote a feature about special teams today. Like they do really value that, and guys roll on that side of the ball, and they aren't afraid to use some of their bigger names. And because I mean, if it wasn't him, it'd be McCaffrey, who's basically going to be a starter this week too. So it's kind of the same issue. So it's kind of you got to pick your poison there. Same thing with Lane on punt returns, but. I don't think they have any issue with him ripping off 70-yard kick returns. So it's like if he does that, misses the next couple plays, it's like, all right, that's fine. I'm cool with that. You know what I mean? So I don't think they're really going to switch it up too much. Part of it is just like you only have so many guys on the roster, right? So it's kind of hard to find who else you would go to if it wasn't one of those two guys. And I forgot to answer your question earlier about Krosky Merritt. I think he's questionable with his knee injury. I think he's going to probably end up playing. But they. Like last week with the Raiders, it's more of a by committee approach, and I think some fans have been like frustrated.
Follow up on that.
Yeah, people are frustrated with him not getting like 15, carries or whatever, but it's just not what they're doing, and so it's going to be a mix of guys.
Gotcha.
What the defense is, oddly for Washington, they've switched this year. Last year, the secondary I think was better than the front seven. This year, the front seven's getting after it. Dorrance Armstrong is one of the guys they paid 2 years ago. Last year, George, I think you could kind of see that in that Lions game that he was starting to do some of the things that they wanted him to be able to do. Kinlaw, as you can see, I think Witt said that he was trying to get Kinlaw last year. It's interesting because sometimes I think when Payne and Allen got here, people thought, well, they were at Bama together. They're probably friends, and they're going to be great together on the line together. And I don't think that's what it was, right? Like, I don't think they actually probably were hangout buddies after work or whatever. And I think Payne is much better sitting there next to Kinlaw. What is the coaching staff saying about exactly what the pressure they're being able to put on the quarterback is able to do for a secondary that is limited at this point?
Yeah, they need it because, I mean, like you mentioned, the secondary, has been pretty beat up by injuries. And then even when they're not injured, honestly, it's just been poor play, particularly at outside cornerback. And they've had some of those even last week. I mean, Trey Tucker, I was covering the Raiders the last few years. I had never seen him look like that before in my life. I was like, what is
Randy
going on?
Moss, man, that was crazy.
So, yeah. So, like, anytime you had those kind of big back breakdowns, like some of it is pass rush, but that's also just, I think Joe Witt said it when he talked on Thursdays. Like, you got to just do your job. It's blowing coverages and not executing. But the pass rush is something that can, sort of mitigate that and level the playing field if you are having some struggles from your secondary. And I think we saw that really come to fruition last week because, I mean, it seemed like almost every time Geno Smith dropped back, like he was running for his life because they were getting back there pretty much instantly, whether it was sending 4 or sending a blitz. Bobby Wagner had a couple of sacks. Getting in the mix there. And like part of that, of course, is like the Raiders offensive line seems to be like awful. And like it's easier to do that against a bad offensive line. So you want to see if they can keep it up and be consistent week in and week out. But, players like DA, like you mentioned, like he's been playing well every week, regardless of, who they're going against. But they're really feeding off each other. It's not like it's just one guy, that's dominating, like, and getting all the sacks every week and all the pressures. Like they're coming in waves. And I think those are the best defensive lines to have, where you can have guys coming off the bench that can get after you. You can't really, focus on double teaming or chipping one guy because if you do, the other guy you can win his one-on-ones and get after you. And so they kind of have the making of that defensive line, you like to have. You just have to see it if they can replicate it on a more consistent basis when they go against, some tougher units. But it's been huge. I mean, it would be important anyway, but especially with the secondary struggling how they are. Like if this pass rush is not going at a pretty high level, like it's going to be pretty ugly for that back end based on what we've seen from them.
God, it's amazing It's amazing the Ben Von Miller just still has. Like, we've never really had a guy that's like super bendy like that. You'd have to go like back to Gillette or something like that. But I mean, I know he's up there in years, but it's been kind of special to watch his get off still.
Yeah, I mean, he had that. I guess he had a half sack the week before, but his first full sack against the Raiders last week, and you saw, like you said, just that get off the edge, and it's been a weird couple of years for him. It kind of looked like towards the end of that Bills tenure, like is this it might be it. I mean, he is old. He's getting up there. I mean, everybody runs out of gas at some point, but I think he's looked pretty good to start this year. Like you're not expecting him to be that same, peak first ballot Hall of Famer, defensive player of the year style of Von Miller, but they don't necessarily need him to be that either if they continue to get the overall production that they're getting from the unit. And so We'll see. Like they signed Preston Smith last week. He didn't play last week, but they do think he's going to come along and get into the mix as well. And so we'll see. Maybe that's another guy that adds to the mix. And like I said earlier, sort of, give them more of that setup where they're just throwing waves at you and they don't need one individual guy to, be Superman up there.
It's going to be an interesting dynamic this week. Obviously, we talked about the Commanders having, eye discipline issues and communication issues on the back end. But, what I find surprising as well is the Atlanta Falcons, Michael Penix and Drake London kind of having to get down your their offense is particularly struggling. We saw that the line has dropped from 3.5 to 1.5 over the last week. I'm curious, what's your level of confidence going into this game? It seems like you are confident the Commander potentially winning this game.
Yeah, I'd be pretty surprised if they lost this one, even with all the injuries, which might sound kind of crazy. But I just think this Falcons team just isn't very good. I think people are a little bit too quick to like jump off with these young quarterbacks. So I'm not saying that Michael Penix is a bust or anything like that, but he has had a rough start to the season, and their offense just always feels like it's not as good as it should be. You got Bijan Robinson, you got Drake London, Kyle Pitts, but they it's always like okay at best, like they're never able to put it all together. And so I think the Commanders defense should be able to, keep them in check for the most part. And then their defense has been better. I think that their defense has been pretty good, but it's going to come down to whether the Commanders can really establish that run game in the same way like they did against the Raiders last week. Because I do think the pass game without McLaurin out there is, it's probably going to be a little, below average probably this week. So they really need that run game to be there. So I think that's ultimately what it's going to come down to. But I do think, based on what we saw last week, that they'll be able to pull it off again. And it may not be a 27-point victory or whatever it was like last week, but I think they'll end up coming out with a win in this one.
Tashan, we like to kind of wrap these things up with a guest pick 'em. We'll put a parlay together. So I went to Underdog, pick some over-unders, and we'll throw them at you, see what you think.
Cool.
Let's see. They've got Bijan Robinson at 80 and a half rushing yards, over-under.
I'll go over.
Okay. Debo, 6.5 receptions.
Over.
Ertz, anytime touchdown.
No, I'll go under, I guess. Or I guess it's not under. About to say no.
Just no. Okay. Let's see. 40.5 rushing yards for Bill.
I think under. This week.
Okay. Write this down. We'll share them. I'm gonna play this one on Sunday, so we'll see. Marcus Mariota, 231.5 passing and rushing yards.
Oh, passing and rushing. I'll go over on that.
Okay.
Yeah, well, both of them, 100%.
Penix, 223.5 passing yards.
Under on that one.
Yeah, I'll go under on that one, I think.
The over-under for the game, this isn't part of the parlay, but I'm just curious. Over-under on the game is 43.5. You like the under or the over for that?
43.5. I'll go under. I don't think this is as many points as last week for the Commanders.
All right, now it's time. Tell us who you think wins this. What's the score look like?
All right. Well, I got the Commanders winning. I think score. I'm trying to make sure I fall into this over under I had now. I think it'll be something like 24-17. That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Okay.
I think it's a relatively close game throughout. But I think the Commanders end up pulling away towards the end and securing the win on the road. I
assume you're going down to the game. It's a beautiful stadium.
Yeah, it's my first time. I've been to Atlanta a ton. It's my first time being in the new stadium. So I fly out, got the 8 a.m. flight tomorrow. So get down there and get settled in and then get to it on Sunday.
Well, have a safe flight, man. And we really appreciate you doing this. This was fun. And all congratulations on the gig at the Post.
Thank you. Appreciate y'all having me.
Thanks, man.